Welcome back to TigerRag.com's Audibles podcast. I'm your host, Jake McMains, and we've got an interesting show for you today. We're going to take a deep dive into the LSU NIL situation. First, we're going to hear a little talk between the News and Sports Director of the Louisiana Radio Network, Jeff Palermo, and Todd Horne, Tiger Rag editor, as they discuss the situation. And right after that, we're going to have an interview that they had with Louisiana attorney Gordon McKernan, who is one of the leading donors and fundraisers for LSU and an NIL leader. But first, we're going to hear from one of our sponsors. We'll be right back.
I think that most people that contact the 90-Day Lifeline are looking to be heard and to feel seen.
Anybody that calls here to talk about anything that has them upset, we will talk to them.
Even on our chat and text services, you will be actually chatting and texting with a real person.
We have enough resources to be able to help people in any type of situation.
We have helpline specialists that are trained to handle the variety of calls that we get.
It's a very laid-back thing. We're not judging anybody. We're just a listening ear that some people don't have.
Y'all ready? Y'all ready? Yeah. Let's go. Come on.
Tiger Rag Radio is on the air.
Let's crank this thing up.
We're statewide, breaking down the latest happenings with LSU athletics.
This is us.
Hear from the coaches.
Put together a defense that puts us in a position to win the SEC.
The players.
Having fun and we working, baby. That's it, baby.
The recruits.
Show some passion and some heart.
And those who cover the Fighting Tigers of LSU and the SEC.
All those things are going to be there, which are important.
It's 2 hours of nonstop LSU talk.
What a privilege. I mean, you get to represent LSU.
Tiger Rag Radio is brought to you by Cummins. Cummins creates power solutions that the world depends on. Helm Paint and Decorating. The paint experts of Louisiana. Louisiana Beef Industry Council. Max Home. And the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Get ready to talk Tigers with producer Jackson Blackman and our hosts, Todd Horne and Jeff Palermo.
Three great players that are better people than they are players.
This is Tiger Rag Radio.
Jeff Palermo along with Tiger Rag editor Todd Horne. We're going to hear from Gordon McKernan at the beginning of hour number 2, who is putting a lot of money towards LSU's NIL effort. What did you make out of we kind of talked about it because it really became public last week when we were here. Brian Kelly's comments about not wanting to buy players. Well, what did you make out of the reaction to it? Did some of what he had to say get completely taken out of context?
In my opinion, yes. In my opinion, what he's saying makes perfect sense. It's like there's a limited amount of money, regardless of how large that amount is, it's a limited amount of money, and you have to spend it wisely. He chooses to spend it on retention, building his team through recruiting, building a strong foundation, focusing on that and spreading that money out through his team, and then patchworking where he needs to fill in gaps through the transfer portal. Whereas you have Lane Kiffin, as an example, on the other hand, who over the past 2 years has brought in, 47 players through the transfer portal and is paying them Fort Knox type numbers, from what I understand, because they're a little bit further along in their collective and NIL process than apparently LSU was, although we'll hear that I'm sure LSU has made up some ground, and we'll get specific with that. We talked a little bit about that with Matt Moscona, but I think what Kelly said made perfect sense. I think people are disappointed, and probably a little, LSU fans are a little concerned because they saw that defense last year and they know how important a defensive line is to the overall formula of a defense, and to see LSU lose out on 2 players that were at the top of that food chain, so to speak, that LSU made a big brouhaha about going after, they're concerned. And I think that the emotion of all of that and these pundits that come out of nowhere that criticize Brian Kelly for making excuses back to, like they say, like he did at Notre Dame, and now he's doing it again with NIL. I made the point when you and I talked about it that this is not the way it's going to be. It's not going to stay this way, where it's rampant free agency and market values are skyrocketing based on the whims of certain players, the way it did this year with the defensive tackles. That's going to change one way or the other. I mean, so I think Kelly's approach although it will not help them specifically in the fall with their defensive line, will help them in the long run if he's able to sustain that. That's a real question, though, because if that defense is not, and the defensive line is key to that, if they're not able to put some stops on, Kelly's 10-year contract, if they don't have a good season next year, could be in jeopardy.
We'll probably hit on this a little bit more in hour number 2, but we only got a few seconds left. Do you think they still sign a defensive tackle out of the spring transfer portal?
I think they do, but I like the idea of them going for that Wesley Walker, the cornerback, who also brings potentially a defensive tackle cousin with him, because they both have starting experience in the SEC.
Okay. We'll talk a little more about that in hour number 2. Gordon McKernan will join us when we come back here on Tiger Rag Radio, so stay tuned for that. Tiger Rag editor Todd Horne. I'm Jeff Palermo. We'll be back after this.
It's your time to move things forward. U.S. Army Reserve.
Well, let's now talk some NIL, and for that, we bring in Gordon McKernan, successful Baton Rouge attorney, and also who is spearheading the NIL efforts for LSU. Gordon, thanks a lot for joining us. We appreciate your time here on Tiger Rag Radio. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Little jet lag. Just got back from Europe last night, but getting by. So it's good to be back home.
You just got back from Spain, right?
Yeah, Spain and Portugal with my kids and my wife for a couple of weeks. So it was a great family time.
Must be nice. Must be nice.
It was. It didn't suck for sure.
Oh, that's good.
It was very nice.
So you came back into kind of a hornet's nest with this NIL situation with the defensive tackles at LSU. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I wish I could say it's much ado about nothing, but it's kind of unfortunately just the way things are nowadays in the sport. And I was just on the phone with Johnny Jones. Y'all remember Johnny Jones, former LSU great? And
oh yeah,
he was,
Bullet.
He's coaching. He was talking to the coach at the University of Houston, and they were just, he doesn't have to deal with the payments and the players. But the guy at Houston was saying, I had some kids tell me he wants $500,000. He's like, you need to go pro if you get $500,000 for that. It's everywhere. We think it's only here in Baton Rouge at LSU, but it's affecting all the colleges and not just your power schools. Everybody has to deal with it now.
Well, Gordon, but before we get into some specifics about the LSU situation right now with Bayou Traditions and just the way NIL is going in general, whatever happened? I mean, when you and I were talking, you and I and Jeff last year about this time or somewhere around there, it was like, oh yeah, we don't talk about NIL packages until they're signed, and that's the rule.
Right.
But obviously, that's not the practice. This is free agency running wild.
Yeah, it's you've got colleges in every state, and you've got aggressive colleges and aggressive boosters and aggressive legislators, and they all want to favor their home school, and so they're willing to get real aggressive against the NCAA, and the NCAA just can't fight the battle on all fronts, and you've got favorable courts in different states who want to rule against the NCAA and help their local state school, and you're just seeing that, and they're sitting there battling. They can't keep the dam back anymore. It's just the dam is broken, and the water's just rushing through.
Well, when we look at LSU's situation, I know you're very involved. You're doing it, the NIL on your own with your own law firm, your own practice.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the G team. You do NIL deals with the individual players. But that's when we talk about the collective, the Bayou Traditions Collective or the collectives at all these different schools.
Yeah.
That's something totally different. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and I do both. So I do write sizable checks to the collective as well, because I think you need to support that. And at the same time, I think businesses would be smart to also do their own NIL deal. So the collective is just a collection of boosters, donors, businessmen who want to further their opportunities in their business allegedly, and also at the same time help the schools and or the kids in different sports. So they give money to a collective, which is it's a company, an LLC, and from that, the LLC will then dole out money to the various sports and various players in varying amounts. And in return, the players still have to do something, right? They have to show up at events or to sign autographs, things like that. It's not a lot. And word is that's kind of, if the NCAA is going to try to make a last stand, or one of the last stands on this, is they're going to try to attack fair market value, right? Just not writing a check for $100,000 for a kid and he does nothing in return for it. Basically, it's just a pay to play. So I don't even know if they'll be able to attack that. So that's one hand, the collective. The other hand is just an individual business signing a deal with an athlete, for that athlete to lend their name, image, and likeness to the company for marketing rights. And that's what you've seen us do with players and athletes across all spectrums.
When you look at since you're so involved with the collective at LSU, there, Wilson Alexander of The Advocate, and we actually had some interviews last week where we talked about with Matt Moscona the fact that LSU's overall collective, or I think I need to correct that. It was the LSU football roster last year from the collective was worth about $4 million. And the goal for this year was $8 million. And it actually, according to, I think both sources and some other people I've talked to, had fallen a little bit short of that, but still the collective was really healthy by LSU standards, even though a lot of teams, according to Jason Belzer, and I think Wilson Alexander quoted Jason as well, because they operate 62 of the D1 collectives.
Right.
It's around 10 million. So is LSU at a disadvantage when it comes to the collective, or are they healthy and looking good?
Yeah, I don't think relative to the other Power 5 conferences, they're not at all at a disadvantage, right? I think it's because of our initial start, changing of coaches, some other things, we were a little slow, but I think this year we'll compete blow for blow, so to speak, with all the schools out there, save maybe Texas A&M. They seem to be in a little bit different league, and I imagine we've closed the gap. I imagine you'll see those guys go up a little bit more, and they'll separate by 5 to 7 million over everybody. They're just, those two are different, but everybody else, we're doing much better. The pool is wider and deeper now, right? The past donors are giving more, and now there are more donors in the collective. So I think we'll be fine.
Well, I was going to ask you, Gordon, when do those that love the program or fans or whatever, they just say, you know what, enough is enough. I can only give so much. How much of a concern is there with that?
Yeah, well, there is donor fatigue, which they have to worry about. But fortunately, we're not there. It doesn't seem that the big donors are giving more, and even the medium and smaller donors are stepping up and giving more. And they're also finally trying to, and hopefully we're there, roll out a platform and ease of use for the everyday fan who wants to give $50 a month, right, to be able to do that. We've had some challenges from the collective side on that a little bit. So hopefully that's behind us, and that'll be full throttle. And that's why schools like Ole Miss have jumped up so much in what they're spending, because they really did harness the buying power of the everyday fan.
I understand that the collective, LSU's collective, is actually supposed to launch a promotion tomorrow. Is that platform related? Is that a platform related promotion? Yeah,
it's supposed to be. Fortunately, a couple of big donors have agreed to do a matching program where up to $2 million they will match from the everyday fan, and all the money will be driven through the collective. And if we raise $2 million in support through that, then they'll match it with another $2 million. So that should make us very competitive.
Gordon, have you been keeping up, and I know the answer to this question before I even ask it, but I'm going to ask it this way. Have you been keeping up with the House versus the NCAA case, which is supposedly going to come down to a vote for the Power 4 by May 23rd?
Yeah, I have a an attorney, not in my office, but Bob Barton at Taylor Porter, who handles all my NIL and sports related stuff. He watches all that, and he sends me little notes or memos when something significant on that case happens. So indirectly, I keep up.
So will that change and actually add, if it is settled the way I think the NCAA is hoping it will be, because it saves them about $1 billion they're anticipating if it goes to court and they lose the battle. But if they settle it, then it sort of adds some, I don't know, some structure and also obviously some revenue share, brings the collective apparently in-house into the athletic department, so it's not a separate entity the way you described. At least that's my understanding. Can you confirm any of that?
Yeah, I think this is all a lot of posturing and leveraging and trying to settle with a common ground solution between the NCAA and the schools. I think most of the smart lawyers who have looked at all this have kind of prognosticated at the end of the day what's going to happen, and I think they're trying to avoid those type of lawsuits and things and come to an agreed upon settlement where the NCAA still has a role in this, because this could go real bad where the NCAA is just basically out and on the sidelines, right? And the SEC forms its own league and they do their own revenue sharing model. Imagine what that would look like if you're a potential football player. You certainly want to go play in that. So I think there's a lot of people who are nervous, and that usually promotes settlements. And I think that's what you're hearing. Mainly the NCAA.
If it would go horribly sideways because of this or another one of the lawsuits, if this one doesn't mitigate or quiet those down, would that mean football would become basically a separate entity in the Southeastern Conference or the Power Four, and the rest of the sports would be on their own? Or how do you see that possibly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've talked with Scott Woodward a little bit about that. Those types of discussions and possibilities are all on the table, because, I mean, when you look at football and the TV contract for the SEC and the amount of money it generates, it's immense. And those SEC athletic directors, I think, I don't think they're going to sit back too much longer and keep dividing the spoils of those contracts equally, if you know what I mean. I think they realize the power of their brand, and they've got some thoughts on how they're going to leverage their product to be more beneficial to this conference and those teams, especially football. And they recognize that.
Finishing up here with Gordon McKernan. And Gordon, what do you say to some of the fans that are just kind of tired of hearing about this? I know it's the new reality of college athletics, but for some that I think still kind of cling to the hope of, hey, these kids are there to play for the school, represent the school. Money is a secondary thing, and now it's all about the money. We know it's driven out coaches out of the sport. What do you kind of say about that this new era that we are in, the NIL era, as some call it?
Yeah, I would think it's nostalgia, right? It's just we're going to have to remember what it was, because it's never going back to that. It's a different time, and it's not going back, and we just have to accept it. And I think once we come to this revenue sharing and things like that, we'll all understand it. There'll be some more structure. I don't think you'll see as much jumping around. It's just going to be accepted. The players are, in this sport are going to get X amount. The players in this sport will get X amount. It'll be settled. There'll be a lot more continuity. But these, young men and women will be getting paid, and they'll be getting paid significant dollars. And those TV contracts go up. They'll probably earn more, similar to the NFL and MLB and everything else. Right. So it's just, that is it. I mean, in all fairness to them, the NCAA has come a multi-billion-dollar operation, and there's a lot of money being made off of these young men and women, name, image, and likeness. So you can understand it. It just wasn't very, very focused and done with great intention and great purpose.
I think that's probably what drives a lot of people, or maybe I think that's what has a lot of people concerned at the moment. It's just not regulated, and it's free for all. It's the wild west, and I think that's what makes people very uneasy about it.
Agreed. I mean, it is. It's not even controlled chaos. It's just chaos, right? I mean, we can all handle being raised kids. We're used to a little controlled chaos, right? But this is like, being given 15 kids to raise all at once. It's insane. It's crazy. I mean, you can't imagine just in the 2 to 3 years I've been doing this, the difference in ask and mentality of the athletes, it's just, at first it wasn't about the money. They still want to come play for LSU. And now I still want to pay for LSU, but I want to be paid really well.
Yeah.
And then I would assume, and I don't mean to put any particular people, kids, players on the spot, but
Right.
it sounded like in one case recently, it was like, I don't care if I play for LSU or Oklahoma or Texas or whoever. I just want 7 figures.
That's right. Yeah, it is. There's definitely some, I think you saw that in some of this most recent with these D tackles, right? They just wanted figures. And Coach Kelly, to his credit, is not hiring mercenaries, right? He's just not. He wants to build a program based upon certain values, both you would find in good family homes as well as in business, right? And that's how he's operating. And I'm very proud of him because I've heard him talk it and I've seen him walk it. And he's not going to do that for lots of good reasons. I don't think he needs to. I think he's right in that we as LSU, with our history, with our pedigree, with our facilities, with our coaches, our fan base, everything we have to offer, we should be able to get players at a discount. And that's just the truth of it. It's kind of like when the Patriots were winning all those years, right? Mm-hmm. People took a little less to go play for the Patriots. And I think Coach Kelly believes what he is building and what was already built before him. You're going to get a better opportunity to play in the pros. You're going to get those special games on Saturday night. And because of that, if you're paid 10, 20% less, it's worth it. And I think there's truth in that.
So it's kind of weird, though, the dynamic. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So you've got Brian Kelly, who has been coaching football, college football, for 33 years. You've got Scott Woodward, who's been an athletic director for several years and been involved in athletic administration for longer than that. And then you've got donors like yourself who've always been major contributors to whether it's the Tiger Athletic Foundation or other areas of LSU. But now you guys are leading the fundraising and the fund building, so to speak. But it's like, Kelly has to step in and be a general manager. He's like a general manager and a coach.
Yeah, without a doubt. That tag now is flowing to all these coaches, right? Because there's going to be a certain amount of money that each collective has and has to distribute in multiple sports, but you're going to be allocated a certain amount of money. And how do you spend that money? And if you go and blow it all on a couple of high picks, or signees, you have enough to get to the rest of the group. And then how do you retain them? So the recruiting part was one thing. Now it's the retention, right? And how do you keep a player that blows up, unexpectedly or even expectedly, and now they want X amount, but this incoming kid says, look, I'm a 5-star, I'm this, I need more. So you can't pay him more than your starters who are performing well. So it's very much like a general manager. It's almost like Moneyball. I mean, you better know your numbers. It's crazy.
Gordon, thanks a lot for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you down the road, and hopefully next time we talk with you, it's because some regulations are being put in place and this thing gets a little more structured. But thanks for your time tonight.
You're welcome. All right. Thanks, guys.
May is here, and with it comes adventure from your friends at the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Enjoy your summer with the 2024 Summer Reading Program. Besides reading fun, check out free programs for all ages at your library. Go to ebrpl.com/summerreading. That's ebrpl.com/summerreading. Your EBR Parish Library is where summer fun begins.
Well, that'll be it for today's show. Thank you, Gordon, Jeff, and Todd for your discussion. We'll be back later this week, but until then, stay tuned to TigerRag.com for all your latest LSU sports news.